What's up, my comic comrades? A couple of weeks ago, we brought you a behind-the-scenes preview of Snyder Capullo's first creator-owned book together, We Have Demons, which was also the first of 8 books to be launched by Snyder under Comixology Originals and his Best Jacket Press imprint. If you haven't seen that episode, you definitely want to check that out. You can find it right here. But today, as promised, we're following that up with an exclusive sneak peek at the next book to be released by Scott Snyder, this time with artist Francesco Francavilla, titled Night of the Ghoul, which releases this coming Tuesday, October 19th. And once again, we've got creator insights for you directly from Snyder and Francavilla themselves, as we walk you through the open for this awesome new horror story. As he'll tell you himself, Night of the Ghoul is basically Scott Snyder's nod to classic monster stories, and it's ridiculously fun. You can find our link to pick it up when it drops digitally on October 19th in the description below. And if you're an Amazon Prime, Comixology Unlimited, or Kindle Unlimited member, you'll be able to read Night of the Ghoul for free as soon as it's available. But in the meantime, let's jump into our sneak peek of Night of the Ghoul, Issue 1. Night of the Ghoul opens up in classic horror style with Forrest Inman and his son Orson driving past an old cemetery in the middle of the California desert. They're in search of a hard-to-find and apparently little-known retirement or rest home. But it seems like this is the father's adventure, and he dragged his son Orson along with him as the two argue about whether it's a waste of time or not. We then learn it's not really the facility that Forrest is looking for, as Orson complains, "It's probably not even him, Dad," to which Forrest replies, "It's him. I know it. I could feel it. We came all this way. Let's just try, okay?" Forrest continues to tell his son, "You used to like this sort of thing. Think of all the hours we spent watching these movies together." While at the same time, we're seeing what appears to be a wolf with bright red eyes glaring at the car as they pass by. Orson responds abruptly by saying, "Yeah, that was a long time ago. Besides," but before he can finish, Forrest spots the building they've been looking for and says, "Look up ahead. What did I tell you?" These first pages have such an incredible classic monster movie vibe, with the art laid out perfectly by Francavilla. Let's see what creators Scott and Francesco can tell us about that, as well as the characters Forrest and Orson.
This book is a big tribute to classic horror movies and vintage horror movies. Francesco is a huge fan, as am I, of all the kind of universal classic monster films and that whole era. And so this is one of those ones that kind of nods at the past in all kinds of, I think, celebratory ways, but then at the same time makes something even scarier than you'd ever imagine in present day.
I have a personal passion for classic universal horror, and more importantly with Night of the Ghoul. It is a love letter to the classic horror, both in movies and in comics, with Creepy Magazine, EC Comics, that kind of stuff.
The main character in Night of the Ghoul is a man named Forrest Inman. He's father to a teenage boy, and the two of them are not getting along. Forrest has always been this huge horror buff, and he works digitizing old films. He had a dream of working in film, and it never really panned out. And his son is angry because he lives in a world of monsters and fiction instead of really paying attention to his family. And so this night is going to bring all of that to a head. And even on that very first page as they're driving in, I think you can kind of get a sense that something is brewing out there. The ghoul is a monster that animals do not like. And so the more wolves and dogs and strays that kind of gather around the edge of that graveyard, the more you know something awful is going to happen.
So that definitely gives us some insight on these characters and why they're here. And on the next page, we see them pulling up to the rest home facility with Orson saying, "We found the old people home? Yay." To which Forrest replies, "Fine, you could act like it's nothing special, but just wait until you get inside that room with him. If this is the real deal, it'll be huge. It'll change all our lives. This could be the night, kiddo, the night our fate changes for good." Orson then pauses and says, "All right, Dad, let's go inside and meet our fate." On the next page, we are introduced to the extremely creepy Dr. Skeen, as we see Forrest and Orson make their way inside, asking to see someone named Charles Patrick. But Dr. Skeen proceeds to tell him, "Mr. Inman, residents here have no family, no support. We alone are entrusted with their care by county ordinance. And Mr. Patrick is a very sick man." Forrest, giving his best con man performance, then responds, "Believe me, Dr. Skeen, the last place me or my son want to be tonight is here. No offense. But with Mr. Patrick on hospice now, Northwood Health just wants to make sure all the I's are dotted and so on." Okay, so this guy's working really hard and doing a ton of lying to get in to see this Charles Patrick. So there has to be more to this than he's letting on. Let's see if Scott can shed some light on it.
Forrest is looking for this man named Charles Patrick, and he believes that the Patrick name is an assumed identity, and that the man that he's looking for is really the writer-director T.F. Merritt, who created the classic film Night of the Ghoul, but has never been heard from again after the studio fire that destroyed it.
Now that changes things quite a bit. Forrest is really looking for T.F. Merritt, the creator of a classic horror film, Night of the Ghoul, and believes that Charles Patrick is T.F. Merritt. But why would Merritt be masking his identity? Let's see if we find out. Next, we head back to our interaction between Forrest and Dr. Skeen, where Skeen finally gives in and says, "I can give you 20 minutes, no more, but if I were you, I wouldn't bring a child in there." Forrest begins to tell Skeen that Orson is mature and that it would mean a lot to him, but Orson interrupts by saying, "No, you go, Dad," which takes Forrest off guard. Orson, knowing his dad won't make a scene in front of the doctors, continues to say, "You go, I'll stay out here. Like you said on the way here, it's nothing special." So Forrest reluctantly turns to the nurse and says, "I guess it's just me," and the two begin to head down the hall, with Dr. Skeen reminding Forrest that he only has 20 minutes. As Forrest and the attending nurse walk toward Mr. Patrick's room, she explains to him that Dr. Skeen is just protective because Mr. Patrick can be difficult, to which Forrest asks, difficult how? She tells him he goes through spells and gets these beliefs about this place, about the doctor, delusions. Forrest asks, but he does have periods of clarity. The nurse replies, he does, but they're often worse. Just prepare yourself. He's a bit of a sight. Now, if you're like me, you're asking yourself, what kind of delusions does this dude have? What is she talking about? Well, I don't know, but maybe Scott can give us some answers.
Well, as they're walking towards the room, the nurse warns Mr. Inman, Forrest, that Mr. Patrick, T.F. Merritt, suffers from delusions. What she doesn't tell him is that those delusions are all about this monster, the ghoul. And what T.F. Merritt believes is that the ghoul is real. It's an ancient creature, oldest living life form on Earth. And it finds a human host, and once it's in a human host, that human starts eating dead things in secret and building up all this pestilence inside them, and it creates plagues and diseases and viruses that it will release at different times to destroy whole civilizations. And no one knows how many ghouls are out there or how old this ghoul might be, should it be in this building, which it is, by the way. The only thing that they know, or that Merritt knows, is that it's responsible for the myths of all other monsters. The disease that it created that caused blood to stay fresh in the dead is responsible for the myth of vampires. This brain-eating bacteria that it created back hundreds of years ago is responsible for the myth of zombies. So it's like the granddaddy of all monsters, and nobody has ever heard of it, and nobody knows whether it exists or not. But if it does, believe me, it's a bad, bad monster. And what happens is, once you get into the room, not to give too many spoilers, but once Forrest gets into the room with T.F. Merritt, as he reveals himself to be, Merritt starts talking about how Skeen might actually be part of a big conspiracy to keep the ghoul hidden here in this very building. Merritt believes the ghoul is real, and it's going to kill all of them tonight, and Skeen is the key to discovering where it is.
Yeah, I'd say that changes things significantly. So somewhere in the building is an ancient monster who T.F. Merritt believes is hunting all of them, unbeknownst to Forrest and Orson, and wants to kill them all. And now that we know things are about to take a turn for the worst, we see Forrest tell the nurse that he's ready to go in. So the nurse opens the door and calls out to Mr. Patrick, telling him, you have a visitor. It's that man I told you about. You agreed to talk to him. We then see Forrest step into the doorway and introduce himself, as he clearly tries to hold back the shocked look on his face. And on the final page of our preview, Mr. Patrick says, please settle right in, as we see a disturbingly burned and disfigured older man on oxygen in a hospital bed. And that is where our sneak peek ends, my people, but as you now realize, things get significantly more intense and terrifying from here, as the legend of the ghoul begins to unfold and the creature gets closer and closer to achieving its goals. We've read the entire first issue and we freaking love it. From the story to the amazing artwork by Francavilla, there are classic horror vibes all over this book, and it's glorious. But before we wrap up, we asked Scott and Francesco what they would want all of you to look out for as Night of the Ghoul releases this Tuesday, October 19th.
What I really want people to know about Night of the Ghoul is that it's a passion project for me and Francesco. We both love horror. We love old horror. We love new horror. What we love most about horror, honestly, is that it feels like conflict just burned down to its purest form, right? A great monster in a horror film is an extension of the things you're most afraid of and the characters are most afraid of. And in this story, the ghoul represents all of our fears deep down, that every one of us is too egotistical or too wrapped up in our own lives to see the giant looming threat that's right in front of us at any moment.
Night of the Ghoul is, again, it's a kind of a descent, and I like to suggest the horror rather than showing, because everybody has their own fear. So I rather have you imagine what horrible thing lurks in the dark rather than me drawing it. So this has been a bit of fun for me to hide a few things in the shadows. So if you pay close attention, even from the opening page to the shadows, you start seeing things.
And that's going to do it for our exclusive look at Scott Snyder and Francesco Francavilla's Night of the Ghoul issue 1. Remember, the issue releases this Tuesday, October 19th, exclusively on Comixology and Kindle. I can't recommend this book enough, and you could use our link in the description to pick it up for yourself when it drops. And just like with other Comixology originals like my book Astonishing Times, you can read it for free if you become a Comixology Unlimited, Kindle Unlimited, or Amazon Prime member. But a huge thanks to Scott Snyder and Francesco Francavilla for coming on and bringing some major reveals for Night of the Ghoul to the Variant Nation. We also want to thank Comixology for collaborating with us on this exclusive episode. And that's going to bring today's episode of Variant to a close, but if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to check out this one right here. And if you like all of our content, subscribe, like, and comment. It always helps the channel grow. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things comics.